Hi everyone, welcome back to the next diecast. In today's video, I'll be comparing the details of these two 1/18 scale Lexus SC430s. This SC430 is made by Motormax and this SC430 is made by Maisto. I did individual reviews of both of these models, unboxings of both of them. I got the Motormax version last year and I got the Maisto version a couple of months ago. I paid around the same price for both of them. They both came to, I think, around like $40 or $42 or something like that in total, with shipping and everything included in those prices. So in this video, I'll be kind of comparing the details of both, and we'll sort of figure out which one of these two models is worth getting over the other model. So both of these models are no longer being produced, but you can find both of them on eBay. In terms of availability, the Maisto version is going to be easier to find than the Motormax version. In terms of colors and everything, the Motormax version comes in gold, white, black, and also a red. The red's kind of rare. And the first three colors I mentioned all have this kind of beige interior, and the red version has a black interior. The Maisto version, Maisto actually made two different versions of this model. They made a version with the roof up and a version with the roof down. The roof down versions come in silver, red, and gold with this beige interior that you see here, and the roof up versions come in black and gold, with the roof up, of course, and with the beige interior with the gold version and the black interior with the black version. And you can find these models for anywhere between, $25 and $50. Oftentimes these models, both these models are a little bit, pricey compared to other models from both of these brands, but because they are kind of a little bit harder to find now as they've been discontinued. And if you happen to find one like in box, like I did in both cases here, the price might be a little bit higher. But we'll take a look and kind of compare the details of both of these models. And we're going to pretty much see why the Maisto is significantly better than the Motormax. I hate to spoil that, but I'm sure a lot of you have seen both of my individual reviews of both of these models. So we'll go ahead and get started with comparing the details. So we got into the availability and like the production history of both models. Now we'll kind of get into the details on the outsides of the models. So we'll begin at the front ends of the cars. Overall, Maisto captures the front end look more accurately than the Motormax version. The grille is kind of too large. It's sort of the wrong shape on the Motormax version, and it's up a little bit too high. The Maisto version is the proper size and shape and proportions compared to the rest of the front end of the car. The Motormax and Maisto versions, they both have, I guess, an overall accurate shape to the headlights. The Maisto version, I think, has a better look to them than the Motormax version. The pegs on both headlights, they are visible. Might be a little bit more visible on the Maisto version, but I think they do an overall better job of the appearance and molding of the headlights. The Motormax version, while the pegs aren't as visible, I don't think the headlights are molded in like the proper shape and everything. There is, I guess, a nice texture on them, but aside from that, I think the Maisto actually wins in the sense of like the overall front end look and the headlights. Both manufacturers chose to paint on the front indicators instead of doing them as separate plastic pieces. They're both, obviously painted on. On the Motormax version, they do add some dimension to the painted on element a little bit, which is kind of interesting. There's sort of like an indentation around it, almost like they were trying to go for like a separate, like light piece look or something like that. By that, I mean, like, it almost looks like they were trying to go for, how these are separately cast pieces. They almost were trying to maybe imitate that, only having it actually etched into the metalwork. So this turn signal, I think, actually looks slightly better than the Maisto version. And then again, they are both, painted on. So that's not really saying a whole lot there. In terms of the overall, like, shape and everything of both models, Maisto definitely has the more accurate shape compared to the Motormax version. You could already tell by the front end that they just did not capture the overall shape like properly. The overall body lines and everything, I think, are more accurate on the Maisto version. Like in terms of like the windshield curve, just how like the line sort of flows alongside the whole car and everything. The Motormax version, the shape is okay at best, but the Maisto version, I think, is definitely better in that sense. Both manufacturers do use fully cast metal pieces for the windshields. You could pick up both these models by their windshields and not risk breaking the windshield. I thought that was kind of interesting that both manufacturers did that. The Maisto version has very sturdy mirrors. Motormax version, not so much, although the mirrors do fold in and out, which you don't really see too often on model cars. There's the passenger mirror kind of folding in and out. And Motormax did omit this feature eventually from their models. I assume that after a while, these were just breaking off of people's models and they decided to just not include them. And yes, these are getting pretty loose. I've hardly ever touched them and they're already kind of getting loose. That kind of speaks to the build quality. The Maisto build quality is far better than the build quality of the Motormax version. You saw in my review that the working top mechanism broke immediately when I first tried to use it on this car. You can see I had to kind of tape this black part back in place. The Maisto version, you do not get the retractable roof, but I don't think that's a big deal because the overall rest of the model is very good in terms of details and everything. And if you look at the paint quality of both models, both do, I guess, a fairly good job. The Maisto version, I think, is definitely better because the paint's, I think, more smooth throughout. The Motormax version, you do see some overspray in areas and kind of like seams almost, but they both have kind of a nice metallic finish to it. The bright silver honestly looks better overall on the SC430 compared to the gold. This is the most common color you're going to find on the Motormax version. The rest of the colors do not come up for sale that much. So that being said, I think the Maisto version is going to be easier to find for a good price than the Motormax version too. Taking a look at the wheels and tires, Maisto definitely wins in that sense. The wheels and tires are the exact. Taking a look at the wheels and tires, the Maisto version I think definitely wins in the sense of having better molded, better proportions in terms of the wheels and tires. They do fill up the whole entire like wheel well as they should. The Motormax wheels and tires, they're too small for the car. And they do kind of an inaccurate job of the look of the rim. They do a decent job of, I guess, the general look of the rim, but in terms of the, proper shape and proportion, Maisto does the better job. The center portion is very wide. Motormax, it's not so wide, but on the Maisto version, it is kind of like the proper width, or I should say diameter, because we are talking about like a circle here. But I mean, the spokes on both models, I think, look decent overall. Both models do have steering. Motormax might have slightly better steering, and the Maisto version has the steering too. You don't get suspension on the Motormax version, but on the Maisto version you do. And I think the wheels are better built on the Maisto version. They don't wobble as much as you see on the Motormax version back here. In terms of the rear of both models, this is where you will start to see some differences. Maisto definitely captures the look and shape of the taillights better than the Motormax version. The Maisto has the third brake light. The Motormax version does not. The Motormax version does have the Lexus badge back here as kind of a three-dimensional element, which is very interesting to see. And you do see the Lexus and the SC430 inscriptions on here too. The Maisto version does have all that, and it is kind of harder to see because you have a silver car with the silver badges. But I think the Lexus badge actually looks better on the Motormax version because it is kind of a three-dimensional etched in or etched out element, I guess I should call it. That being said, the other badges I think are better on the Maisto version than the Motormax version. Maisto has the more, I think, accurate font, if that makes any sense. And with the exhaust pipes, the Maisto version does look better. They're actually hollowed out. Motormax version is just kind of these solid, sticks back here. They don't usually do a great job with their exhaust systems on their models, and I think they're far too small for the car. And you have this weird kind of seam back here. These older Motormaxes often have these kind of seams as if there was as if they kind of welded the car together and just left that part unfinished. Maisto, you don't see that as much. There is kind of a seam here, but it's kind of hidden well with the paint. And the real SC430 might have that seam because if the fact that both models have that, I'm not too sure on that. But anyway, those are the rears of both models. And the Motormax version does look a little bit bigger compared to the Maisto version. I think the Maisto version is actually scaled a little bit more properly. But you can't really tell too much unless you put these next to other models that this one is actually kind of bigger than this one. And seeing them side by side, I think the Motormax version definitely is slightly larger than the Maisto version. So next we'll get into the opening features of the models here. We'll begin with the trunks. This is where the biggest difference of both models is. The Maisto version, the trunk opens up like so, and you have kind of a generic, looking trunk in there. On the real car, if this were the real car, you would see the folded back roof kind of tucked away back here. Maisto did not include that, unfortunately. If this were the roof up version, this trunk would be more accurate looking because the roof would be up, and you, of course, would not see it back here. The Motormax version, the trunk actually opens up like this because, as I mentioned and showed in my previous videos of this model, it does have the retractable roof feature. And you can see here that this piece has been broken off, and I have it kind of taped on to the rear trunk lid. This black piece should be attached to these two kind of tabs here, and it would actually move up and down, but it broke off. As soon as I opened up the model and tried out the top for the first time, one of these little pieces snapped right off, and this actually came already broken, like it wasn't attached to this. The other side was. So that was just a big, huge mess, and I was pretty, like, kind of ticked off about that. Like, I was kind of excited for this working top feature, but because the Motormax build quality of their models is so poor, pieces just started breaking, like, right away. So that's pretty much why I ultimately decided to replace this model with the Maisto version back here. But I guess we will have the top kind of go up now that I have this open. The two roof pieces themselves are actually decent. It's just the coloring is kind of off because you have sort of a plastic piece paired up with a metal piece. You can already tell this is kind of less of a metallic finish or like a glossy finish than the rest of the car. So not really too great to see that, unfortunately. Yeah, here's the trunk in here. Motormax, I think, does the coloring properly. It should be black. Although both manufacturers, the back half of the trunk should be black and the front half should be beige. So Maisto does it partially accurate, and so does Motormax too. Although, as I said, this should be two different colors. It shouldn't be all just one color. So we'll push this back in here and close up the trunk. And here's the model with the top up. And you can see all the huge panel gaps. Like every Motormax version is going to have this giant gap where like the trunk closes. You have kind of the big border around like the door here. Even like when the roof is closed, it doesn't actually like fit fully flush with like the windshield. I mean, from a far distance, it looks, you know, decent, I suppose, but you can still tell that there's the panel gaps there. So here's kind of both models again. You have the roof up and then the roof down, I suppose. So although the Maisto version does not have the working roof, that's not a big deal because it really isn't the best quality feature on the Motormax model. Like, I would say if you want a model in general in your collection with the working roof, go for the Maisto Mercedes-Benz SLK from 1996, which I have that. Maisto does a better job of the build quality on that working roof mechanism compared to the working roof mechanism on this Motormax Lexus here. So there's, I guess, the two, you know, roof differences and the trunk differences. We'll take a look next at the engine detailing of both models. The engine, or the hood, the engines. The hoods open up like so on kind of these tight dog legs, so that's nice to see. It means that the build quality is pretty good in that sense. Engine detailing is pretty similar in both models. Maisto, I think, has slightly more like three-dimensional detailing in it. They are both just one single plastic piece. Although that being said, they both have a decent amount of coloring on them. You do see and you do see the Lexus badge on both. You have the Lexus and the 4.2 VVT. Same thing on here, 4.2 VVT. The Maisto, I think, has a more accurate three-dimensional molding and more coloring in there. Motormax, you do see some pulleys and stuff down there, which you don't see on the Maisto version. So both engines, I think, are decent efforts for the manufacturers that are making these two models. Although I think as a whole, the Maisto engine is better in terms of like paint detailing and everything like that. And Maisto, you do actually have the plastic liner underneath the hood. The Motormax version, you do not. And both hoods are going to kind of weaken over time. I wish both manufacturers included prop rods with their engines on their models, but you don't usually see that too much, unfortunately. We'll take a look next at the interior detailing. So both models, on the Motormax, the doors open wider and they do open up on dogleg hinges, although the dogleg hinges do get loose over time. The Maisto version, you do have the spring-loaded hinges, although they are kind of hard to open, and they do kind of squeak too. Both model manufacturers have definitely improved with the build quality of their opening doors on their models since these two haven't made. Both of these were made around 2002, which are when the real SC430s came out, just to add that. Definitely better looking door panels on the Maisto version. You have a lot more fine detailing, like with the wood grain look and all like the window buttons and everything. You have a nice like texture going on, kind of like the leather wrinkles in that center portion. The Motormax version does have the decent kind of leather texture in the center, although the rest of the door panel just looks fake. This orange should definitely have some more wood patterning to it. The door handle should actually be silver, at least in like the center portion. And the beige is kind of fading to yellow, which is really bizarre. A lot of these older like Motormax versions in their interiors, they use like just different shades of beige and stuff and brown. They never really looked that like attractive in terms of colors and everything. And you can tell, like, I think this should have been the same color as the floor and the seats at one point, but maybe it had sun damage, I'm not really sure. You don't see that kind of weird discoloration on Maisto's models with beige interiors. And you can already see that the overall dashboard and center stack detailing is better on the Maisto version. You can see all the buttons are molded in that center portion there, and you can see all the different wood grain look. And even the steering wheel too has very good detailing. You have the wood grain on top and bottom, and kind of that leather pattern going along the center, and that Lexus badge in the center of the steering wheel. The Motormax version, you do have buttons, but none of them are colored in. And it looks like that the center portion was just kind of shoved in there. It looks like you can just pull it like right out. The Maisto version, it is kind of a single piece, so it looks a lot more flush with the rest of the dashboard. But yeah, not that good of a job in here. And that orange just looks ugly, I think. I wish they did a better job of kind of detailing that like wood grain texture. And you do see the screen on the Motormax version. On the real car, the wood panel you see on the Maisto version would retract back and expose the screen. So there's kind of a close look at the buttons. You can pretty much read all of them on the Maisto version. Whereas on the Motormax version, all the buttons are there. They're just not colored in at all. I think the placement is overall accurate, but aside from that, there really is not too much to say on that. The steering wheel on the Motormax version does look actually pretty decent. It has the nice Lexus badge in the middle, and the nice, I guess, attempt at the wood grain texture. But the Maisto, I think, definitely wins with the steering wheel detailing and the dashboard and center stack detailing, for sure, by like a long shot. Although both manufacturers do a great job with molding the gauge clusters. You can see here's the Motormax version and here's the Maisto version. I'm not sure. The Maisto version is chrome and the Motormax version is silver. I'm not really sure which one is accurate, but at least they both have the accurate shape to the actual gauges. In terms of the seats, the Motormax seats are, I think, far too small, and there's this weird kind of huge section down here that shouldn't be that big. And the seats are kind of done in one single piece. I think they do a good job of the overall like texture and everything. The seats are just not the accurate size or shape. Whereas on the Maisto version, you definitely have the accurate size and shape, and even have and you have a nice texture going on too. Both manufacturers do include the separately cast seat belts, although I think both could have done a better job. The Motormax version actually has better looking buckles on the seat belts than the Maisto version, which is interesting to kind of see that. And on both Motormax, the shifter area just looks like it was painted orange, and they didn't really do much detailing on there. The Maisto version is the accurate shape and coloring and everything. Maybe a little bit too yellow for the Maisto version, but at least they actually paint that area black around it, as it should be on the real car. And the back seats, same deal. The Maisto version, I think, has a better overall shape and look to it. Both manufacturers do a nice job of putting in the silver Lexus badges you see on the rear, on the back portions of the front seats. The Motormax version, I think, is a little bit more pronounced and more three-dimensional looking than the Maisto version. But the Maisto version, as a whole, has more accurately shaped seats and everything, which is nice to see. And then you do have better looking pedals on the Maisto version. They don't just float up from the floor like you see on the Motormax version. You can tell that they're obviously just put on with a single like peg or whatever. So not really too great to see that. We'll close up the doors. Undercarriage detailing on both. The Motormax version, not really too much to say. At least the exhaust is silver as opposed to a chrome. You can see some engine detailing actually underneath the front portion there, and an abundance of screws too. These are always fun to take apart because you have so many little tiny screws that might get lost. But there's that undercarriage. The Maisto version, I think, includes more detail overall, but the chrome doesn't look necessarily accurate. I think the Motormax version, in terms of the exhaust pipes, look a little bit more accurate because they're done in silver. With that being said, the exposed part you see in the back, the Maisto version is definitely better. The Motormax version is just two kind of like solid pegs back there. It does not look that great. So while the Motormax version does have the roof feature, don't expect it to be the best quality. You saw that mine had that broken piece, and then I ended up breaking it more trying to fix it, which I guess was just my fault. I don't know. Although I have seen eBay listings of loose versions of this model with, you know, some degree of broken roof like mechanisms. I've seen some with this top panel missing, some with the black part broken like mine has and everything. So it goes to show that I think in this sense, the overall detailing on the Maisto version absolutely wins. And I think the Maisto version as a whole wins in this comparison, because on the Motormax version, you just don't get the best build quality and the best fine detailing that you would expect for a model of the price range that you're buying these at. Granted, these are both budget models and they both do have their flaws. I think the Maisto version definitely still wins in the sense of being, the better detailed, the better built model. So that was my comparison of these two models here. I hope it was kind of helpful to sort of show you the differences of both. I know in the past I've done these comparisons and the models were pretty similar. In this case, they were pretty different in many aspects in terms of detailing and overall fit and finish and whatnot. So I hope this video was helpful, and feel free to comment down below with your thoughts on both of the models here. Thanks for watching.